one last time of what our purpose is: to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our strength and all of our soul. And it should be that which we enjoy doing, because we cannot outgive Him. I want you to turn very quickly to the final pages of the Old Testament. That would be in the book of Malachi, right before your New Testament begins. And we're going to look at chapter 3 for a minute. On the final page of the Old Testament, before there is a 400 period of year silence from God, He accuses His people of holding back on Him, and He calls them to return. He says in verse 10, I want to go to verse 6. I, the Lord, do not change. So you, O descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Ever since the time of your forefathers, you have turned away from my decrees and have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the Lord Almighty. But you ask, how are we to return? Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, the whole nation of you, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have room enough for it. God is telling His people in these last pages of the Old Testament that they are robbing Him. They are not giving Him what He deserves. He speaks here about their tithes and their offerings, and He urges them in verse 10 to bring it all, and they will not be disappointed. Can you imagine that He might feel the same way about our willingness to love Him with everything we are? Because in John, when we get to the New Testament, John 1:16, He says, from the fullness of His grace, we have all received one blessing after another. Jesus desires your life to be overflowing, abundant in fruitfulness. He's been holding back what He wants to pour into you long enough. And I want to ask this question: how much longer will you and I make Him wait for us to want Him?